Hi, yes, hello, welcome to a video that is different from my normal videos, but none of them have really a formula, so it's not that different actually. I am joined by someone else, so I'm not alone, not solo. My co-host, my wife,
Hello.
but we're here to just talk about like books, Percy Jackson, whatever, reading, all
Reading
of
as
that.
an adult, specifically.
Yeah, all of that fun stuff that comes with it, and yeah, hope you enjoy.
Hopefully you like Percy Jackson.
Or just reading in general.
or
It's not
reading
just
in
Percy
general.
Jackson.
And fan fiction does count. Thank you very much. I think people forget that.
I don't read a lot of fan fiction, so I can't really comment on that.
I
will
can.
say.
And I'm saying that if you read fan fiction, you still read. So hopefully you enjoy this video.
Well, we'll see. But I will say, I don't read a whole lot. I have only recently gotten back into reading, actually, at the start of this year. I want to say January or February. Actually, with Percy Jackson.
Well, before we talk about Percy Jackson, we have to talk about why it's a big deal we read Percy Jackson.
That is true.
Because to some people, it just sounds like we read a book, and like, oh no, you read a book.
I like all books, though.
So, the thing about Percy Jackson that's important for this video and for us is we read it for the first time again as adults.
Well, I had never read it before, actually.
I did. I read it as a kid. Because
she is the reason I read it.
my brother read it when we were younger, so the whole family read it. And as a kid, I really enjoyed it. He had no experience with it. And the reason we're bringing this up is because it's the first thing we read as adults, so we should probably start with why we stopped reading.
I read a lot in school, especially thanks to the Accelerate Readers program, I want to say it was called. And I read a bunch of books. You could take the quizzes afterwards, get the points. It made it a lot of fun. I really enjoyed doing that. And it also made me want to seek out books that were like, above my reading level, because you got more points for it. And they also just bigger books, and it made me enjoy reading a lot. The school eventually, I think I got Black Beauty, which now that I've seen some of Black Beauty, it's a really small book. But the copy I had, at least I think I had, it had a black horse on it. It's a massive looking book, so I grabbed it. I question if it's Black Beauty or not, don't know. But the school took it away from me because it was like apparently above my reading level, so it said, even though I was already reading books that were a higher reading level, and it just killed my enjoyment. I didn't really read any more books. I still read comic books like Turtles or Batman, stuff like that. But like, as far as it goes for, I guess, just a regular book like we think of, didn't really read them anymore. Until I got homeschooled one year, and my aunt let me pick out a book, and it was a copy of Redwall's first Redwall book, so just Redwall. And it had like Matthias on the cover. He looked all cool for the sword and shield. I enjoyed that book a lot, so I started reading Redwall books. But it was just Redwall books, nothing else. Only Redwall, and I eventually stopped reading those books too. And I didn't really start reading again until, like I said, February of this year.
Yeah, I kind of had the opposite issue. I read an insane amount as a kid. Anything I could get my hands on, I would speed read through. Dear America Girl books, especially. I tried to read Harry Potter one year, and my grandma told me that the book was too big for me to finish before the end of school. But that's not where I stopped reading. I kind of just stopped reading as I got into high school, and I was reading a large amount of just fan fiction because I felt like that was accessible and it was on my own terms, whereas reading actual novels, I had to be introduced to a new cast, to a new world. It felt like it took time out, whereas fan fiction I could read on my phone or my laptop and still hang out with my friends, and that was way more important to me than reading after a certain point in time. So then I just stopped reading novels. I stopped looking at books. I stopped caring, really. I would always look at something and go, that sounds cool, or that looks really interesting, but I would never pick it up. I would never stop by the library or any of that stuff. So for a really long time, I was just reading fan fiction. Like if I told you I was reading, I was probably reading fan fiction until December. And this is where Percy Jackson comes in. Because for the show coming out, I decided I wanted to revisit it because it had that same familiarity and ease, but it had been such a long time. I wouldn't remember all the details, so I would get the enjoyment of falling in love again with it alongside the show airing. I just asked him to join me because he was interested in the show, and I was like, well, I'm going to be reading it. Maybe you could read it. And I think he started a month after me. But we were reading very close together. So we basically read the books alongside the show. So from December to February or March is really when we started reading. Not like Percy Jackson was pretty quick to get through, which opened the door to us just reading again. But I had the experience with some of this stuff, and he just got reintroduced.
Yeah, it was all new to me, because all I ever knew of Percy Jackson was... I watched the movie when it came out, not in theaters, thank God. But, like, you know, that was all I knew about it, was just the movie. You know, it had a second movie. No one talked about that one. Like, I heard mixed things in the first one. People liked it, people didn't. Second one, it seems like no one liked it.
You know, it sounds like, or I hope, maybe... it doesn't sound like this, but Percy Jackson was important because it opened the door to reading again as an adult. For reference, we are in our 30s, so going back for me to a book that I read in middle school made it feel a lot easier to get back into something that I kind of thought was really involved, that took a lot of time. So to read a series like Percy Jackson, which is, you know, a middle school series, really helped me get back into the rhythm of reading and remembering, one, that I'm a fast reader, but also if you like a book enough, it's not heavy, it's not involved, it's not time consuming in a way that feels like a chore. So choosing a book that I had experience with before as a kid really was an easy jumping off point, which I guess before I get into what I read after Percy Jackson, I should get a little bit more in depth with how I actually felt about the books as a kid and now. As a kid, I kind of read them because my brother was reading them, and I like supporting my brother and his interests and making sure that, like, we have something to talk about. But I was also very into Greek mythology when I was younger, and I still am. So he used that as his opening of, like, hey, did you know? And I was like, okay, all right, okay, I'll read it. And I really liked it. I read all 4 books. That does not mean 4 were out at the time. It means he gave me the 5th book and I never read it. But what I read, what I remembered of it, I had a great time. Thoroughly enjoyed it. So much so that, like, we went to opening weekend for both Percy Jackson movies. Although, in our defense for seeing the second movie in theaters, we hoped that they had learned, which is why we went. And we all know how that turned out, so we don't need to talk about it. We all understand how that turned out. But I enjoyed the books as a kid. I thought they were a fun time. And reading them as an adult, they weren't the same experience, but it was still very good. I still really enjoyed my time with Percy and the world and that whole thing. And I did get to experience the 5th book for the first time. And it was kind of everything I didn't know I wanted out of the series and out of a conclusion. And so it really made for a nice experience as an adult, getting to read it and see how Luke's story ended and how things ended for Annabeth and things like that. Whereas a kid, I just went, they're so cool, they're so great, this is awesome, and I'm like them. And as an adult, I got to see, like, hey, here are valid points, here's really good world building.
Luke was right.
And, like, here is flaws that these characters have, which as a kid, I think it's really easy to overlook, because you don't see it as a flaw, you see it as something that you relate to. But as an adult, you can kind of go, hey, you maybe need to walk that back or address that or something. Luke was kind of right also. Not in his whole thing, but, like, he had points. But, like, that was my experience as a kid. It's just I enjoyed it. It was relatable. I'm also neurodivergent, like those kids are. So seeing someone else have ADHD when I had just been diagnosed a couple years prior was really nice. And as an adult, it still had that same feeling of seeing these neurodivergent kids still be great, still be exceptional, still be all of these things while still having like, hey, you can't read or you're impulsive or whatever. So both times were very different experiences, but both positive. And the show is a whole other thing that we may or may not get to. But the books have been just a really great experience for me as a whole, as long as you keep it in a bubble.
Yeah, they're really good books, all 5 of them, and there's only 5.
Only 5.
At least that's where, like, I've definitely stopped at. Well, I did read Chalice. Well, I listened to an audiobook of it, actually. I mean, a new one just came out. I'll probably check it out, but anything past Percy Jackson, I'm not super into doing. Like, I have read at least a little bit of the first, what was it, Heroes of Olympus?
Mm-hmm.
It's okay. It's alright.
I've only read the first 5 books, and that's where it ends. For me, that's all I really needed or wanted.
Yeah, Chalice is kind of a cash grab, realistically. That's a lot of how it felt, kind of, when I read it and also listened to it. I did both.
We can talk about that later.
That is true, we can.
But that's not what we're here for. So, getting to read it as an adult was great. And he read the whole thing also.
Yeah,
to
and
the
Ellie.
To the point he's read more than me, like on his own, like willingly, has gone out of his way to read Chalice of the Gods on Libby.
But yeah, no, I only recently got into Percy Jackson. Like I said, never read him as a kid.
So no nostalgia.
No nostalgia for it. Didn't even know, like, when the movie first came out, I didn't know it was based off a book. I just thought, like, oh, okay.
That's crazy.
That's all it is. I didn't know. I didn't know there was a book. I don't know if maybe I saw them at, like, those Scholastic book fairs or libraries.
That is like someone saying, I didn't know Avatar: The Last Airbender was based off a show when the movies came out. Like, I need you to know that that's how crazy that sounds to me.
Didn't know it was a book.
Okay. I guess this can act as a bookmark for this is how different our experiences with Percy Jackson was.
Yeah, all I knew was that, oh, it's a movie. That's pretty cool. So, like, everything that it got wrong, I didn't know it got anything wrong, because I had nothing to go off of. Didn't know it was based off anything.
Crazy.
So. But I have no nostalgia for it.
Okay. So we've talked about Percy Jackson kind of to the moon and back, but, like, I promise that's not all we've read. And that's not what all we're here for.
No, it's not just Percy Jackson.
Percy Jackson, the TLDR, is Percy Jackson was a very good stepping stone to getting back into reading as an adult. And I took that chance to revisit stuff. That I either read as a kid or I felt like I missed out on as a kid for whatever reason. Some of those reasons are really stupid in that mindset of, oh, well, I don't need to read it. Everybody else has already read it, so it doesn't matter. Or, like I said, I was already in that mindset of just not having the time, not thinking that spending the time to read a chapter or whatever was worth it. So there's stuff I missed out on. So my immediate next series after Percy Jackson was The Maze Runner. And I had seen the movie, and that was it. I saw the first movie, and I don't know. I just kind of went, wow, that was really cool. I really like it. I hope they make more. And then never picked up the book, never saw the rest of the movies, until I was in my 30s, when I said, let me see what I missed. And so I started on The Maze Runner, which I thought was great. Which I may also talk about that separately in the future, because I have the most brain rot for The Maze Runner.
I haven't read The Maze Runner. I only watched the first movie recently, which I also didn't know The Maze Runner was based off a book.
God, we need to educate you.
I knew Hunger Games and Harry Potter was a book.
Okay, so what did you read after Percy Jackson?
After Percy Jackson, I decided to check out which is also while I was currently reading Percy Jackson as well. But I checked out some of my old Redwall books from the library. It was Outcast of Redwall and Rackety Tam. I think that's how you say it. I don't know.
We're gonna assume that's how you say it.
That's how I've always said it.
So we both went back to nostalgia, but in very different ways.
Yeah, no, like, I checked out 2 of those Redwall books again, just to read them. They still really hold up for me. Rackety Tam is great. It might be for little or 8-year-olds, but, you know, I still enjoyed it. But also, reading it alongside reading Percy Jackson was kind of wild, because I forgot how violent Redwall was.
Yeah.
And, like, both of these are aimed
at the same demographic.
At kids. I think Percy Jackson's going for just a little bit older. But, like, I mean, not by much, obviously. I don't know, man. Side by side, there were scenes where, like, Redwall would just brutally kill this person and be kind of descriptive about it. Where, like, Percy Jackson could have, like, a similar situation.
And it's hard to tell they even got hurt.
Yeah, like, it's wild, man. Children's books are violent. Why is this?
So, I've read, thanks to him, I have also started reading Redwall, specifically Mossflower, and comparing that to some of the other stuff that I've read, and then being told, oh, by the way, this is for children, was the most tonal whiplash I've ever gotten in my life. Because, I guess this is a spoiler, if you haven't read Mossflower, here's your warning. But there is a scene in Mossflower where, like, someone poisons their father, immediately takes the castle, and accuses their brother of being the murderer, and that's just all played straight. There's no humor, there's no lightheartedness, there's no nothing. It's played completely straight. Whereas in something like Percy Jackson, there would be a lighthearted moment, there would be an undercut comment, and Mossflower does not play with that. And it was, like, bold. They also take a captor at some point in Mossflower and immediately break his sword, and, like, that doesn't sound like it would be a big moment. It doesn't sound like it would matter a lot. It does. It does. It matters so much so that to make a point of him, she takes his broken sword and hangs it around his neck, and he just wears it pridefully of, like, it's a reminder. Percy Jackson wishes that that tone could be that heavy sometimes. They're the same demographic, and it's crazy how different things can be when they're for the same age group. And I just found that really fascinating, and I still find it really fascinating, which we might also talk more about later. But not, like, now later, like another video later.
Yeah. But, you know, I went back to some of those, and, you know, I've branched out to stuff I've never read before. Starship Troopers, actually, is probably one of my favorite books now. And I had only ever seen the movie as a kid, which maybe I shouldn't have watched it as a kid, but that's neither here nor there.
We don't talk about that.
We don't talk about that. But there was all, like, discourse about that. It got me interested. So
He keeps reading controversial books.
I keep reading controversial books. I have a copy of Stranger in a Strange Land, and I haven't gotten to it yet, but it's on my list of things to get to. But I enjoyed Starship Troopers a lot. It's probably one of my favorite books. I like military sci-fi. It's kind of what I learned from it. I didn't finish The Light Brigade. I plan on going back to it and finishing it. I enjoyed it. I've read a little bit of the Forever War, and what little bit I've read of it, I enjoy it. If there's any other military sci-fi, I think there's one called Old Man's War that I've heard about. People say it's pretty good. Haven't been able to read it yet, though. But yeah, if you have any, let me know. I'll be sure to check them out.
So I will get to Starship Troopers at some point, mostly because I promised him, and I want to see what
true. I read the Hunger Games for this.
Yeah, so that's the path I kind of went down, is, like, in all the stuff I missed. So I went and read The Maze Runner. I read The Hunger Games. I have really just gone down this path of things that I feel like I missed out on, which has also led me to kind of realizing that I'm very into mysteries. And And I wish I could say I like contemporary fiction, and I feel like deep down I do. There's something about it I can't bring myself to read, so I will read things that are adjacent to it. So, like, something that's really high on my list to read is the Inheritance games, because it's supposed to be a really good mystery, contemporary fiction type of thing. So, reading has really been opened up just because we revisited an old favorite of mine for a TV show. And now we're reading kind of anything that's appealing.
Yeah, just anything we really feel like. It's been fun. We also read Six of Crows. I enjoy. She's wrong.
Okay, here's the thing. So he really liked Six of Crows. He read the whole thing. I think we bought the duology.
No, we own the first book. I got Crooked Kingdom from the library.
Oh, that's right.
Read like 3 chapters and decided, wow, this is just the same book, isn't it? Which I'm sure it's not. I will get to it. It felt really similar.
It was too close together. But yeah. I did not like the Six of Crows. I don't think it's a bad book. I think it's actually quite well done in its characters and world building, especially. Quite a lot of things it does right, in my opinion.
Juiced is my favorite crow.
Shut up. I just could not get past the pacing. For me, for the way it was put together and the way things were moving, I got like legitimately halfway through the story and I just kept feeling like nothing was happening. So I quit.
Yeah, you got to when they were like on the boat or what?
Yep.
I don't think you even made it to...
No, I did.
Did you?
When they land?
Okay. So...
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I made it pretty far.
So you got like kind of right before the heist.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just felt like nothing was happening. Even when stuff was actively happening, I just, couldn't really... I just couldn't bring myself to feel like anything was happening. So I DNF'd it, and I called it good. Which is a shame, because, heists, mysteries, thrillers, they all kind of sort of have a similar vibe. And I just couldn't with this one. Which is really funny to me when you're like, it's my favorite book. And I'm like, I'm so happy for you.
Yeah. Which, like, for the record, it's not my favorite book.
But you like it a lot.
I do like it a lot. I enjoyed it. I do think the actual heist portion of the book is probably my least favorite part. I liked a lot of the build-up, the setup, everything, them getting to it, and even, like, early on with the heist was fun. But, like, I don't know, like, the actual heist and stuff, I don't know, I could have, like, read them just in a room talking all day.
You're not the only one that feels that way.
Be perfectly fine.
Like, what we've seen online, quite a few people feel that way.
That is true.
Which... being online and reading is a whole experience, because sometimes some things are best taken when you just go, I've read it, I've had my experience with it, and I don't need to know anybody else's opinions. But sometimes a book really doesn't let you do that. Like, sometimes you have to know other people's interpretations, or if they felt this way about this scene.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it makes you want to talk about it. Like, wow, I really enjoyed this.
Yeah.
What is other people saying?
And
no one says anything. You can't find nothing.
No. I keep saying our. Let me say my. My 2 complaints with, I guess, trying to find a conversation about reading these days is that you can't. It feels so complicated and so hard, and kind of like either everybody is saying the same sterile opinion, or they're just not talking about it.
No.
Like, there's a book that I DNF'd. It's called Library of the Unwritten. Fabulous premise. And I wanted to see if someone else felt the same way that I felt, because I got the recommendation from a booktuber, that book Leo, or the book Leo.
Yeah, the book Leo.
The book Leo. And I was like, I'll take it and see what she has to say. I kind of came away saying the same things. And I wanted to see if other people were saying stuff. And there's very little about it. And I feel like that's really common. And I've also noticed, which this is my biggest complaint, is that before anybody says anything about a book, they have to give some sort of disclaimer about the genre it's in or the demographic it's aiming at.
Oh, yeah.
I don't care what the demographic is. If I've chosen to read it and you've chosen to read it, we're clearly in agreement.
Well, it has to be adult fiction, though. It has to be real literature.
Real literature.
Or high fantasy, whatever.
No. But that's something I've noticed in reading these days, is that it feels like it's so hard to find a legitimate conversation. Or even books that are uncommon, maybe they'll get lumped into like a top 10 video.
Yeah, no, you'll see a lot of the same books with stuff. Which, I get why. Like, it's what's popular. It's what's gonna, probably bring you money. And, that's fair. Like, hey, everyone wants to eat. But it makes it less interesting. I just keep seeing the same one. Like, you'll find whatever video of someone talking about like a book. And, like, I can't tell you how many times I've seen A Court of Thorns and Roses in the thumbnail for just whatever the topic's about. It's crazy. It's annoying.
Yeah, and there's... It's fine to talk about the popular series and the popular books at the time. But some of the stuff that I've looked at, that I've come across for a book that I like or whatever, is years old. From a very, very small channel.
Yeah.
And, why? Especially because sometimes it's like these books don't even seem like they're that underground. They just seem kind of old. And that's not the same thing. Because, it ends with Us, from what I understand. It's an old book. It gets talked about all the time. But,
Well, it's Colleen Hoover, though, so it's probably still popular.
It is still popular.
Which, the movie probably also helped boost it in its popularity, I'm sure.
True. But there are some things where I'm just talk about smaller books in between your algorithm videos,
or just have more just varied topics about books.
Yeah,
a lot of what you'll find honestly is stuff about book talks ruining reading, or even booktube ruining reading and stuff like that. And you'll see ones like that from a month ago or a year ago to 14 years ago. I guess maybe not for book talk, but for booktube. And it's the same complaints they were saying back then, but now, and how many of these videos can you possibly make?
The other thing is, if you're making these complaints, make sure you're not doing the same thing. Make a weird, out of left field video. I watched a Rachel Oates video recently, and she's largely poetry critiques. It felt like the first analysis of literary work on YouTube that I've seen. And I understand that might have to do with the stuff that I frequent on YouTube. I do recognize that. But I still watch booktubers, between my personal YouTube and between his YouTube that I happen to be in the room for. So much of it feels like they're kind of saying the same thing, making the same references, and doing these things, whereas Rachel Oates at least is talking about technical aspects and the history of something, and it feels really personable. And now when it comes to booktube, I feel like I only get that if I'm watching a smaller channel or an older video or something, and I feel like I shouldn't have to reach so far for that, and yet I find myself constantly having to do that. So I guess the big thing that I kind of want to know, is anybody else experiencing this? Do you guys feel like you're having the same issue as a reader or as a viewer of not finding discussions, not finding videos, not really finding content that feels like it actually does something for you as a reader?
It actually feels like they read the book they're talking about.
Oh my god. Yes.
Sometimes, they'll just talk about it, have complaints, and it's very much well, did you read it? Which, shout out to a Reddit thread where someone admitted that, they skim read the books.
Oh, so it was this Reddit thread where it was talking about things being, verbatim, or, not verbatim, vernacular.
Yeah.
Things being vernacular. And someone straight up admitted that, they didn't like vernacular, not because it's hard to read, but because it made it hard to skim read the book. You're not supposed to skim read a book. What do you mean?
Yeah. Which I have no issue with vernacular.
It's because you read Redwall.
Growing up with Redwall, I have no issue. I'm currently reading The Yearling right now, and they talk in vernacular, and
it's real hick.
It's real Southern for sure.
I struggle with the vernacular. I've tried to read The Help, and I really struggled because it was vernacular. There are a couple of other things where I really struggled. But if you want to read Redwall, you gotta muscle through it, because the moles, sure, we'll call that speech.
Their rustic mole speech.
Their rustic mole speech. You muscle through that if you want to read a Redwall book. So that has helped a little bit, but yeah, no, like, someone fully admitted, like, oh, I don't like vernacular because it makes it hard for me to skim through the pages. That's not reading, my guy.
No.
So it makes me wonder how many readers or potential booktubers or whatever are reading
doing,
like that.
You know, I read 50 books in a week. I mean, did you? Or like, I'm sure you read them, but did you actually retain it? Did you actually, I guess, read it?
Yeah, like, I do wonder that, of like, did you retain it? Did you sit with it? Did you process it? And I feel like half the time the answer is yeah, for a couple of them.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's...
Like, maybe when I started doing it.
Yeah, yep. So that's kind of an interesting thing to see. I think also because as a kid, when you're reading, you're talking to your friends about it who maybe are also reading. So you just talk about the things that you like. But now, as an adult, you're like, I'm looking for, commentary on it, either on YouTube or Tumblr. Tumblr is like my big social media because I don't trust anything else, but everybody's kind of brain dead a little bit everywhere. But like, looking for commentary on it on YouTube or Tumblr, or if I'm really bold, I'll go to Reddit sometimes, and feeling like I'm just not getting any returns.
Yeah, no, it feels like you can get better conversation or topics out of, a movie, a game, TV show, but for a book, it seems really hard. And also, something I've noticed, like, for example, I recently read Where the Red Fern Grows, and I never had to read it for school. I didn't have to do that. Sorry for you guys who did. That's rough. But I did watch the movie in school, the original one, not the 2003 one. And all you can find on The Red Fern Grows, really, is just, book summaries, stuff like that, because it's something that's, you're made to read in school. So obviously people want to just get a summary, get that, so you can...
Get the Spark Notes, but, in audio.
Yeah, like, just, do good on a test. And it kills kind of any discussion books like that have, or whatever else might also be having to be read in school, of just like, well, I don't care for any of this. I need a summary. I need to pass the test, man.
Which is really a shame, because I think there are some books that you're forced to read in school that are quite good. The issue is you're forced to read them in school, so you don't care. And you're just like, I don't know, man, I need the TLDR so I can write a report, I guess. I can see how that makes you not care for a discussion. But when that's the only form of discussion that's happening, it's really disheartening. And it makes me wonder, like, is anybody talking about classics, or really talking about books beyond just the here's what gets me clicks, or here's what you expect to hear, or whatever?
This is the safe opinion.
We watched a guy recently.
That is true. We watched a guy who clearly he enjoyed the book version of Starship Troopers, but was really trying very hard to kind of not outright say it, or even just... I mean, he kind of wasn't saying anything at all, and it felt... You could tell he didn't really want to, because, you get labeled fascist if you like the book or stuff like that. People kind of side-eye you, and like, sure, whatever, do what you will, but like, my guy, have an opinion.
The issue also is he put it in the video, and then it's its own chapter where he says nothing.
No.
Like, I could have skipped that chapter of the video, and none of it, like, it wouldn't have mattered. I came out with the same information, or, actually slightly a lesser opinion, but like, the same information about him. Because I feel like if you're going to go through the work of editing, recording, doing all of this stuff to put it into a video, at least say something a little bit with your chest. And
No.
he just didn't. And I feel like that's annoyingly common, is people will put something in their video, they'll make sure that it looks nice, that it sounds nice, that it's in there. But are you saying anything? Is this your opinion? Or is this popular opinion? And sometimes I think it's popular opinion, and I walk away not knowing what the actual person I'm watching feels about the thing that maybe I came there for.
Well, look, I need you to subscribe, so I'm gonna say this, and you will agree with me. Thank you. Bye.
Sometimes it feels like that. And it's not that it sometimes feels like that. Sometimes it feels so blatant.
Yeah.
So what are we doing here? If that's your attitude towards it, what are we doing here? You're wasting your time, you're wasting my time. I have better things to do than for you to not tell me your actual opinions.
I'll make my own video, damn it.
That's why we're here.
Pretty much.
Because reading as an adult has become this really interesting experience for me. One, because I'm just getting back into reading, so obviously that's its own journey. But also seeing the way people treat it, like the way people treat young adult. Like it's so taboo. Ooh, I liked it. Yeah, man, it's a book. And some books are bad. It does not matter if they're high fantasy or young adult or whatever. Sometimes they're bad, and sometimes they're really good. And sometimes, this is, I think, also another thing that I've kind of noticed, where people are afraid to say that something is mediocre or bad.
Yeah.
Going back to Library of the Unwritten for a moment, I don't have many issues with the book. I just wasn't vibing with the book. Like, my big complaint, the thing that made me stop reading, was that I didn't like the antagonist's chapters. It's not necessarily that I didn't like the antagonist, he just had chapters, and I felt like it really detracted from the moments he had with our heroes, and so I left. But if that's not something that would bother somebody, I would highly recommend the book. It's a very interesting premise. I quite enjoyed it. I just didn't care for the antagonist. But it's a book that I think is fine and even well done. It's just not for me. And I think some people have an issue saying that something is mid or bad or it's good, I just didn't like this thing, but I would recommend it. I feel like there's very little nuance in reviews, and, it makes it hard to kind of walk away having an opinion or knowing whether I want to experience it or not. So, what do when all you're finding is safe, even opinions?
Yeah.
Like, what do you do at that point other than apparently do what we're doing, which is make our own content?
That's true. Which some people have opinions that I will say I've never heard. I want to give a shout out to the person who called Lolita boring. I've never read this book.
Yeah, okay, so for a record, neither one of us have any experience with Lolita. We haven't seen the movie. Neither of us have read the book. We haven't even, skimmed a chapter of it or anything.
No.
Nothing. Just for the record.
But, I've heard all sorts of things about it from people who like it, people who don't like it, people citing, if they do like it, of how, disturbing and uncomfortable it is. And some people who don't like it because of that, even if they realize that, that's the point. I'm supposed to feel that way. I get it. Don't like it, though. I heard all of these opinions. Someone who's just it's boring. I don't know. That's wild. That's crazy.
In a Reddit thread, some guy just was like, I don't know, it's just incredibly bored. And that is so baffling to me. But those are also kind of the opinions that, I can't say I wish that I heard more of, because obviously you don't want videos of people saying, yeah, I don't know, it was boring, and talk about how boring it was.
It's boring, subscribe.
Yeah, you don't want that. But it would be interesting if, more of the controversial opinions or the hot takes that people have actually kind of felt like hot takes, or felt like differing opinions. Maybe we don't watch the right booktubers, but given that...
probably not.
Given that we've found Reddit threads with the same complaints from like 8 years ago.
8
I
years
don't
ago,
know.
Even more recent as well.
I don't know that it's us just not being in the right corner of YouTube.
Like, I don't know, I feel like you just can't really find anything interesting of like, well, I don't know, I really like this thing about this. Or like, any other piece of media, there'd be a video, it'd be like a fucking 4 or 5 hour long video.
It's not a
about,
Quentin
like,
review.
The Cabbage Man from Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Is that a
why
real
he's
video?
significant. If not, someone's gonna make it.
Oh,
Give
okay.
it time. Someone
Okay.
will probably make it.
We'll let Quentin know. I mean, that's something else. Is like, books as a form of media is treated so differently than movies and TV and like kind of anything else. It's almost its own elitist club.
It kind of reminds me of music in a way where people would be like, oh, like, especially if you like metal, and like, oh, you're not listening to like the right metal band, so you're not like a real metal fan. This is real metal.
Okay.
You're not reading the right book. This is real literature, not what you're reading.
I mean, that's a really good point, because I hadn't thought about it like that.
Like, oh, the Transformers movie novelization, you're reading that? You should read,
Yep.
I don't know, 1984 instead.
Yeah.
Which I have. I actually plan on reading it, because, on a quick aside, actually, it is a book I was forced to read in high school. I wasn't interested in reading it, because it was boring. And also, there was a girl in my class I would much rather been talking to instead than reading this book. Didn't care for it. But, like, I keep hearing it being referenced and stuff. Really important book, blah, blah, all of that. So, I do have a copy. It is on my to-read list. And also, kind of looking it up. It sounds like it's meant to be slow and boring, and, like, that's fine. That makes sense. That's cool. But, like, just shoving it on, like, a 16, 17-year-old kid to read, nah, I didn't care.
Yeah, I have no experience with 1984. I don't actually have a lot of experience with books that could be considered controversial, but I almost have something worse for like the books that I like, the books that I lean towards in the greater reading sphere that I've noticed online could be considered juvenile, or oh well, they're all young adult, you're not really reading. But some of the most impactful stuff that I've read have been in young adult, because The Maze Runner did something to my brain. I don't know what it is, but it did something to me. Vampire Academy, one of my favorite series, which I've not finished yet, so please be mindful. I reread it once every 2 or 3 years. Fabulous series. Much better than Twilight. And The Hunger Games is also something that, you know, reading it now, oh, I get it. Like, as a teenager, I was like, the movies are great. This is so cool. I really like these actors. I'd never opened the books. I had never cared.
Yeah, which, real quick, in regards to the first Hunger Games book, the way it ends, I've heard people call that a happy ending.
How?
And, like, unless you just mean because they didn't die, no?
Yeah, no. Especially with the way the second book immediately starts.
You know, I haven't read the other book, so I only just now read the first one. And you still owe me Starship Troopers.
I know. I'm sorry. I'm taking a break from reading.
It's alright, I'll make you read Stephen King.
God, don't.
I don't read Stephen King.
I know.
But I'll make you though.
No.
Pet Cemetery,
No.
let's go!
No! But that's, you know, I have something kind of worse where people really like to look down their nose at young adult, not really caring for the actual content of the books. So he's reading controversial shit, and I'm kind of reading what people look down their nose at, which is infuriating for both of us, because we run into these brick walls of people not getting it, or not giving it enough nuance.
Well, like, what's weird is that, you know, you'll see people give young adult a lot of shit for whatever reason. Like, oh, it's aimed at, like, a younger demographic, that's fine. But then you can catch some of these same people, which, you know, for the record, before I throw shade at it, not really. But, like, I like Avatar: The Last Airbender. It's a good show. It's great. It's on Nickelodeon. It's for kids. It can be deeper. We all agree it's deeper. Has great messages, blah, 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 all of this stuff. At the end of the day,
It's for kids.
It's for kids. But these same people who will, trash something like Hunger Games can, sing and realize the praises of something like Avatar: The Last Airbender, when, they're both aimed for a young audience.
Yeah. And it's interesting because animation still has those same struggles, but they're easier to overlook, or it's a lot easier to convince somebody of the worth of an animated show, of the messages of an animated show. But younger books, you have to really, really stick your heel in and make sure you're making an argument. And then make sure that, you are not just saying, here's why I liked it. You have to be really, really, committed to saying, here's why it's good. Here's the messages. Here's the journey or whatever that you don't see. Here's why it's different. I don't have to try that hard for a movie that you've seen one trailer of. I've seen a trailer for The Wild Robot. I've seen a review for The Wild Robot, and people seem to really like it. I really want to see it. Do you know how hard I would have to fight to get to have someone actually go with me? I wouldn't have to try that hard. It's a children's movie. I could say it looks cute, it's got Pedro Pascal in it, and it seemed like it had funny moments, and people would go, oh, okay, cool. But if I try to suggest Vampire Academy to somebody,
I will say the title doesn't help its case.
I know. I am aware.
I haven't read it.
I know.
Or, is it a show and movie as well?
Yes.
But I thought it got something else.
It did. It had a movie in 2011 or something.
But, I have no
and
experience
the show
with it.
came out. Whatever. I don't talk about those.
I will say the title though, Vampire Academy, makes me think of Sky High or something.
The point is, I would have to try so much harder to get somebody to read Vampire Academy or the Maze Runner series.
Yeah.
But it takes 10, maybe 30 seconds to convince somebody to go see this movie they've never heard of. And why? Why is it so different? And I think it goes back to that thing of people kind of thinking, if I read this story, I can say that I'm an elitist. I can say that I get it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's cool that you get it. You can also get this other thing and be in the same club. You're just as smart for, understanding high fantasy and young adult. It doesn't make you any less intelligent, but people treat it like it's a sign of your intelligence if you're reading young adult.
And it's one thing if you just don't like it, if it just doesn't appeal to you. That's fine. But it's mostly the people who just kind of snub their noses at it as if it's beneath them, and anyone who likes it in any kind of way is also beneath them.
Yeah, there's someone we've come across where regularly there's a big to-do, there's a big disclaimer of well, it is young adult, or even though it's young adult, and why do you need a disclaimer? Do you disclaimer your other books that you've read like this? No, you don't. So why is it being treated differently? And that is something that I really just did not have an experience with as a teenager or as a kid. My experience as a teenager with anything close to that was a whole other phenomenon that I'm not going to get into right now. But it, is the phenomenon of how people treated the readers of Twilight and stuff like that at the time. It's this phenomenon that I didn't really experience as a kid or as a teenager outside of what happened with Twilight, which I'm sure I don't have to explain. But as an adult seeing this, it's so strange because there's this need to add a disclaimer or some kind of side note that the book that you're reviewing or discussing is young adult. And it always comes with this connotation of oh, just, young adult, but not in the same way that you would be casual about oh, I don't really read horror, but I really enjoyed it. or thriller or whatever. Even romance with its side eye and assumptions that people have, I still don't think it gets the same level of condescension as young adult. And having experienced this, getting back into reading is just such an odd feeling because I don't understand it. I don't get it. Like, to me, young adult should be treated just like anything else. And yet, if you look constantly, there's this disclaimer or despite or for young adult. And I don't really see that anywhere else. And it's just been really weird and kind of jarring to see it happening so often. You know, a lot of them are like, oh, you know, despite it being young adult, it's surprisingly good or something. And it's like, why? Like, what is the purpose of this? Maybe I'm just more aware of it now as an adult. Maybe it's just something that's more on my radar now. I don't know.
None of this is to say that young adult doesn't have any of its own problems. A big issue with it is that it can kind of just be a catch-all for everything. Look at series like Redwall, Percy Jackson, Hunger Games, and even Six of Crows. You know, the last two are classified as young adult, while, you know, Redwall is for children. I've seen it called middle grade. I guess that's fine. Percy Jackson is a middle grade series. But I have seen people call Percy Jackson young adult, and I've seen people call Redwall young adult, and I don't agree. And, you know, you look at something like those books, and even just with what's in, like Six of Crows, you know, it's definitely for a bit of an older audience. Not too old, obviously, but old enough. And it's just, where does it fall then? At what point does it become more for kids than adults? And it has nothing to really call its own in a way concretely that it feels like.
Yeah, young adult is definitely new. It's a new category, which I do think kind of allows it to be an easy punching bag, which just makes it more frustrating because it's a catch-all. It's got a little bit of everything, so you can kind of just finger wag in the general direction of young adult, and you're gonna hit something.
Yeah,
you know.
I do hate when people call something like Redwall. I've seen people call it young adult, and like,
no, it's middle school.
Like, I don't even know if I'd say something like Percy Jackson or even like Harry Potter is like young adult.
I think Percy Jackson, well, more so Harry Potter, even though I haven't read the books. I think those are weird series to kind of classify because they grow with you. So as the characters grow up, as you grew up with the characters, it did reflect a darker tone.
Yeah.
So it would be weird to classify the whole series as children's books or young adult. And I think the series like that are hard to classify.
Yeah, but I think that's kind of the issue with young adult, though, is that, like, I still wouldn't think something like Percy Jackson, even those later ones, like something like young adult. Because, like, I mean, there's still a different tone to it versus something like compared to Hunger Games.
Yeah, that's true.
And I'd even say Six of Crows, like, just those three books are just, you know, one of them is very different from the other two.
Yeah. No, I mean...
And, like, that's kind of the issue with it. It feels like you can just label something really easily as a young adult when, like, it shouldn't.
I mean, that is something I've noticed, that it is, like, a catch-all for stuff. And I do think it needs a better classification, because contemporary fiction, I generally know what I'm getting. Kind of. I say that like I read it a lot. Again, I wish I read it a lot, but I just can't. I'll get there. Mystery or thriller or... you know, whatever, you generally know who it's for and stuff like that. But young adult, it's a grab bag.
Yeah.
Of, like, it could be for my 13-year-old niece.
I mean, it definitely has a thing of, like, alright, if you slap young adult on it, we'll sell more copies.
Yep.
And, like, that's definitely an issue.
Yeah. Which I think it's also easy for things to just feel like they're confined to a box, which makes me appreciate Leigh Bardugo a lot more, even though I don't know if I vibe with her, like, as an author. I also do vibe with her as an author because I have to give her respect for specifically making young adult series with young adult in mind, and then going off and making specifically adult fiction instead of just going, I'm going to throw this all under the same umbrella. No, because Six of Crows and Shadow and Bone are young adult. She wrote them with the intention of being young adult. But then I believe Ninth House and one of her other books are specifically...
Was like The Familiar or something?
Oh, yeah. The Familiar in Ninth
like
House. Something like that. Specifically are written as adult fiction.
Yeah.
And I really respect her for actually being mindful of the differences instead of going, I can write an adult book and slap young adult on it and make banger money.
Yeah.
Like, you know, and I don't feel like I see that too terribly often, so I at least have to give respect to that for actually writing with young adult in mind from the beginning instead of getting to the end and going, hey, psst, did you know? And so that's something that at least I'll give some authors credit for, like, being mindful about it. Yeah. I just feel like not a lot of authors are mindful about it, which is a whole issue. I do like young adult as a whole kind of being a grab bag, but I think there needs to be something else alongside it so that you can't just take a random swing.
Yeah, I can kind of feel like it can just invade everything.
Yeah, I mean, it does kind of just invade everything because young adult gets treated as just one big monolith of something, which is so weird because if you look at it, there's horror, there's romance, there's, you know, mystery and all that kind of stuff, and it just gets lost inside of being young adult instead of being categorized correctly. And so it gets lost in the, like, to the wayside when people who kind of don't look at young adult or only read very specific things, they never really get the chance to experience certain books because it's not in their preferred genre. Stuff gets left out a lot because people have preferred genres, or they only read one genre, which is something that I've noticed. And I don't mean like they only read young adult or adult fantasy. No. So there is a booktuber that we found recently. Her name is Haley Flaps.
I don't know her last name.
Something. She's married to another YouTuber named Ryan. And she said that she largely only reads romance, to the point that she knows what the 3-act structure of a romance book looks like, to the point that she can, like, nail down what the issue is going to be in the 3rd act in almost every book.
Yeah.
That's crazy to me. And you said there was a guy.
Yeah, there's a guy. What, Library of a Viking, I think his name was?
Yeah, Library of a Viking.
And like, homeboy only reads, like, fantasy books, or, like, high fantasy or whatever. And literally nothing else. And, like, you know, that's fine if you want to read some of that, but you don't want to check out, I don't know, just anything else? Just a mystery book? I don't know, historical fiction? I don't fucking care. Just all of it, just this type of fantasy, like, you know, I love Redwall to death, but, like,
only Redwall
reading more
forever.
books, though, like, I couldn't just read Redwall. And, like, you know, look at some of what I've been reading or whatnot. Like, you know, I've been reading the Redwall books. There's Percy Jackson, Starship Troopers. I want to read more by Highland, honestly. But even just his books, like, I mean, he's got, like, different genres and stuff. And, I mean, I've even checked out a few, like, movie novelizations, because why the hell not? They're fun. And, like, I guess also, like, children's books, because of Where the Red Fern Grows, and I reread The Giver, because we had to read that in school, and actually really enjoyed it.
Yeah, you're going down this path of rereading children's books specifically because they're controversial in some way.
I mean,
like Where the Red Fern Grows. You're currently reading Old Yeller. What else? Oh, The Giver.
yeah. I mean, like, children's books are just they're really dark. They're dark in ways that most things for kids just aren't dark. Because, like, bring up Redwall again. I read, the first Redwall book, and I later found a DVD copy of, I think it might have been, like, all of Season 1, or at least some of Season 1 of the show. The show feels for kids. It feels like the target audience the book is going for. The show feels like that's the audience it's hitting. The book, though, has, like, so much violence and stuff in it. It's crazy. It feels like, even as a kid when I watched the show, it felt watered down and felt like it's for kids, despite the fact that I myself was a kid. And that's wild. Like, why? I don't know why children's media is so messed up. Like, even, like, Where the Red Fern Grows. Like, I knew how it would end because I watched the movie as a kid. Reading the book, though, it's gut-wrenching, honestly. It's really sad. You should read it.
I've never read it, but I can't imagine sticking to one brand of book.
No, like, I read whatever looks interesting,
especially
honestly.
so exclusively that I can go, all right, here's a beat, here's a beat, here's a beat, here's the conflict, here's the resolution. Like, you can do that with other media just because they all follow that same structure. Like, movies all follow the 3-act rule. It's just different in how it actually executes it. That's fine. But to read a specific brand of book so much that you have it down to a science like that, and then not having any interest in anything else, I just don't get it. Cause like I've read The Hunger Games, I've read The Maze Runner, Vampire Academy, and all of Percy Jackson, The Six of Crows, and Library of the Unwritten. On my to be read is Belladonna and the Inheritance Games.
And Starship Troopers.
I have to finish Moss Flower, and also a book called For the Wolf, which is a Little Red Riding Hood retelling, which I'm excited about, but it's on the list. But I just pick up anything that looks interesting. Like, another book that's on my to be read that I don't even know what to do with this. I found it once at a thrift store we go to. I've never heard of this thing. And I read the inside cover and went, that sounds insane. How do you tell this story? And I went and found it on Libby and added it to my to be read, which it's called Dearest Josephine, if you're interested. It's a crazy premise for a story. I just was so intrigued that I was like, yeah, absolutely. The thing that's had the most impact on me this year is like a thriller mystery book that has not stopped me from picking up fantasy and, historical fiction and, stuff like that. Because Bridgerton is also on my list of things to read. And I can't imagine just being confined to, like, let's say dystopian. Like,
yeah.
No? But it seems so common to just, I mostly read this. Why? Why? Like, do you only, like, that? That's like saying you only watch one brand of a movie.
I mean, I guess it's like music game with people who are like, they only listen to metal. They only listen to metal.
I mean,
and sometimes
I guess,
very specifically this type of metal.
I mean, I guess so, yeah. That's, maybe books and music are more similar than I ever.
Don't read or listen to anything, actually. Just abandon this hobby. You'll be much happier.
Well, just, buying books is its own hobby. Reading is a separate hobby.
That is true. Buying books, buying toys, do what you will. Although books are a lot cheaper than a Transformer, I can tell you that.
Yeah. But reading as an adult is just a wild experience that I think people maybe don't really talk about. Because
people don't read, though.
I mean, that's what I was going to say. I think it's because people just stop reading. So getting to go back to it and really actually pick it back up has led to a really interesting situation
Readings for nerds.
from December till now. I say that like we're done reading. We're not done reading, obviously.
Had a great year of reading. I've had my fill though. It's enough words to take in.
I've seen enough. So I guess to really truly end this, what's your experience been like reading as an adult compared to when you were a kid?
Yeah, did you ever stop reading, or did you kind of have a similar thing like with us, where like maybe you read a lot as a kid and then stopped and got back into it, or have you stopped and just never gone back to reading, or have you just never read at all?
If you haven't read it all, I'd like to hear why. Does it not interest you? Do you feel like it's too involved? Whatever. I'd really like to hear, because I've always found an appeal to reading in some form.
I mean, it could be a thing of like, because I know part of it can be, reading is something I had to do at school for work. Reading is not something you do for leisure time.
Yep.
Why would I ever read on my own time?
Yep. So, to end this. Again. We've ended a lot.
You're welcome.
Thanks for listening if you've stuck around this long. And make sure that you like if you like it. If you didn't like it, tell us why you didn't like it. But subscribe so that you can hate or not on future videos. And if you are a reader, give us some suggestions. What are you reading right now? Let us know.
I'll read just about anything. I don't care.
So, yeah, give us suggestions. Let us know what you're reading, what you think we would like to read. And we'll see you in the next one. Or he might.
See ya.
Bye.
Alright, and we're live. Which we're cutting that out, obviously.
Oh God, a broadcast. 3, 2, fuck.